Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what you want can keep changing. And I feel like what I'm doing more or less is somewhat mainstream, but I'm actually still always trying to figure out my path and trying to figure out what I'm meant to be doing. Both like how can I give most and how can I feel the happiest and most settled. So.
I love that. Welcome to the Orchestrating Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Becca for short, and I'm a clarinetist who studied at the Eastman School of Music and then went to London to get my master's and PhD, both at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Having shifted pathways in my own life, I love hearing about the varied careers musicians can have and how they got there. And that's precisely what we're exploring in this podcast. As I sit down with music graduates to chat about their unique musical journeys, hear their hard-earned wisdom, and learn about how they're orchestrating their own careers. For today's episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with Molly McDonald, a violinist in the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra and member of the Salaff Quartet. Molly did her undergraduate degree in violin performance at the Eastman School of Music and then her master's at the Cleveland Institute of Music before winning a one-year position with the RPO. Throughout the interview, she shares her experiences from growing up performing folk music with her parents, entering a professional orchestra while still finishing up her master's, and taking auditions and moving around the violin section within the RPO. Molly shares such thoughtful insights into taking auditions, playing in a professional orchestra, and balancing family life as a wife and mother to 2 children alongside her musical career. She also has a super fun side hustle of flower arranging that's really cool to hear about as well. You're listening to Molly and the Salaff Quartet playing an arrangement of Debussy's Clair de Lune under this intro. Stay tuned till the end of the episode to hear some more of this performance. And now let's get right into the interview. Hello, Molly, and welcome to the Orchestrating Your Career podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's really nice to see you while I'm here in Rochester. And I have very distinct memories of move-in day at the Eastman School of Music. My first day moving into the dorms, and the RAs were here to greet us, a resident advisor at Eastman. And I just remember you being in the circular opening of the dorms and welcoming all of the students, and all of the RAs, including you, were so warm, and it just really set the stage for my time at Eastman. From the beginning, I just felt enveloped in the Eastman community, and it was wonderful. I became an RA 2 years later from my last 2 years at Eastman, and that was largely because of the impact that the RAs had on me. Coming back, I feel that same welcoming environment, and it all started on move-in day with you guys. So I'm really grateful. In addition to being a wonderful RA, you're also an incredible violinist. You now play with the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra. So it'll be really cool to hear about how you went from studying at Eastman all the way back around to living in Rochester again and playing in the orchestra. But before that, could you just go back to the beginning for me and tell me how you got into classical music and why the violin?
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So, growing up, I had a lot of music around my house, and both of my parents are musicians, and they are more like folk musicians. And so my dad always played guitar and fiddle, and then he also, when he met my mom, or when they got married, he taught her to play the accordion, and so they started playing music together all the time. So when I was little, I would always fall asleep listening to them rehearsing for their next gig, and I very much admired my dad and his fiddle playing. So when he would play, really fancy stuff like Orange Blossom Special, I would just be like, oh, I want to do that. Can you teach me that? So I did sort of beg to play the violin, and eventually they caved in, and my dad was like, okay, well, we're not going to buy you a violin, but we can make one. So we made my first violin out of it.
How did you make a violin?
Well, it was a little makeshift. It was a cigar box, at which we kind of fashioned the neck and put a couple. It only had 2 strings on it. And he taught me to play a couple tunes on it, and I sort of like gave it back and was like, no, really, I want to play the
Wow.
But then I sort of like came and went to that a little bit when I was younger, and then it wasn't till I was about 9 years old that my parents basically signed me up for violin lessons, and at that point I was sort of like, I don't really know if I want to do that, but they signed me up for lessons and encouraged me to keep working at it.
Yeah. So was that private lessons or was that in school?
Private lessons.
Okay.
Yeah. I studied, my first violin teacher was a violinist in the Kansas City Symphony. And it was a little hard starting at that age, the age of 9, because I had a lot of musical background, of course, in my family, but not a lot of skills. So I was 9 years old and I was playing lightly row, and it just felt a little silly. Like I felt kind of embarrassed.
So did you feel sort of older?
Yeah, I felt kind of older than my other colleagues, and I felt, I guess it was frustrating at the beginning, but ultimately I moved through music pretty quickly because of all that background, and I already knew how to read music. So eventually I got a little more hooked on it, but definitely my parents had to encourage me to keep going at the beginning.
And I had read that you played a lot with your family. What did that look like?
They just started including me in some of their performances. So cool. At the beginning, I would just kind of get up and do one song with them. I might sing with them or play the violin. And then I really liked that. We played at like a lot of retirement communities and libraries and very kind of low key settings. Yeah. But I kind of got a rush out of getting up and performing. So I always wanted to do it more and more. And ultimately, my parents would start letting me do a whole program with them, and they would even start paying me a little bit for doing it. And so that was a nice introduction to performing and what that feels like, how it can be fun and rewarding. Yeah,
that's really cool. And it's really amazing that you got to start doing that so early, I guess, because I feel like maybe a lot of music students don't start performing out in the community until they're studying it at music school or something like that.
Yeah, and it's ironic because I kind of came to the violin a little bit late, actually, but kind of came to performing a little bit early in a funny way. So,
that is funny. So when did you start thinking that you wanted to do music as your own career and study music, and how did you end up here at Eastman?
Well, let's see. I think during maybe middle school and early high school is when I got a little bit more serious about the violin. And I can remember, it's hard to pinpoint when I got more entrenched in the violin, but I definitely remember going to one Kansas City Symphony concert that was very impactful, because my teacher would always give us tickets to the symphony, and so we would go a lot. So I remember going to one concert where they were playing Dvorak New World Symphony. As you can imagine, as a high schooler hearing that for the first time, it could really blow your mind. Some pieces you hear and it doesn't really catch you from the beginning, but that one really caught me. I mean, I was just on the edge of my seat, like at the brink of tears the whole time. I couldn't believe it. And then I went home and listened to a recording of it about like 1,000 times. Probably most people have like an impactful memory like that. And so that opened my mind to to the world of orchestral playing. I started thinking I really wanted to do that. And then also I, alongside that, started having some really fun other experiences. So we had chamber music camps when I was growing up that I attended over the summer in Kansas City. And that was super fun and super challenging. And I met so many like-minded people at those places. So I found some of my closest friends, and we formed a group that played together throughout the year, and we did gigs of our own and that kind of thing. So I think just feeling like I belonged in that, with those people and in that setting, helped me start to make that decision.
Were you looking at a bunch of different music schools? Were you considering universities versus conservatoires? What was sort of the thought process behind applying to schools?
Right. Let's see. So I feel like I went into the whole school thing a little bit naively. Eastman was only on my radar because my friend, who was a year older, Dan, cellist from Kansas City, came here.
Okay.
So I knew what Eastman was, and I knew what a couple other schools were just from word of mouth. And I applied to a couple, maybe 3 conservatories and 2 state schools. And the decision, I only got into Eastman and then one of the state schools. So the decision was made for me very easily.
Yeah.
And Eastman was actually my top choice, so it worked out really nicely.
Yeah. Did you come take a lesson before, or did you just come for audition day and experience Eastman for the first time on that day?
Right. I think, no. I did come visit. I did come visit and take a lesson before, so I had an image of the place. Yeah.
Was that partially why it was at the top of your list, because you had come and visited and had a good experience?
I think partially. It's sometimes hard to say. I feel like I just really didn't know a lot of what was going on. I guess I just got a good feeling. I knew my friend was there.
Yeah.
And
I think that example is always really helpful to see, someone who was in a similar place to me, position to me, and now you can see the pathway that they started and recognize that, that looks like a good one for me to follow as well.
That's a good point. It might have just been it provided some clarity when I really didn't know what was out there. So. Yeah.
What was your experience at Eastman like? So you had come from this background that sounds pretty rich in performing and playing, but now you're in this very competitive, academic, music-filled environment. How was that transition for you, and what was your time at Eastman like?
Yeah, I had a very positive time overall at Eastman, and it's something that I had been craving for many years. Although I loved my high school friends and I loved the challenges of my program that I was doing in high school, I really was always craving being in a music school environment. So finally being there felt really great. And then I would say that there were also a lot of challenges. So I think I came in and came into school with a lot of insecurities and still have a lot of insecurities, maybe about starting late, feeling like a little behind all the time. Yeah. Which is okay, because I feel like I have always thrived feeling like a small fish in a bigger pond. That's always helped me make progress.
Because it's pushed you to work harder? Or?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it's pushed me to work harder, and it's been inspiring. And so I felt a little bit that way at Eastman. I didn't feel like I connected that much with my first teacher, and I was with that teacher for almost 3 years. So I felt like there was a lot of searching. I was just trying to figure things out for myself. I was trying to get better, but I didn't always know how. Yeah. And so, there were just a lot of personal challenges there, but I still did have a wonderful experience, and I loved the school and I loved my friends. But in retrospect, I spent a lot of that time searching. Yeah. And then finally my last year, I guess it was my junior year, I started taking rep class with Juliana, who's the concert master of the RPO. And that was a little bit of a light bulb moment, like another one of those sources of clarity that I desperately needed. And the way that she taught made so much sense, and it was so efficient and so effective and so practical. Teaching orchestra rep, I was like, being in an orchestra is what I want, and here's someone who's really showing me how to get there. Thank goodness. Thank you. That's what I've been craving. So I actually switched into her studio my final year at Eastman, and then I stayed an extra year to keep working with her, and I think that sort of might have propelled me into a positive phase in my musical progress.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's really cool. And I think that feeling that you're describing of searching at conservatoire, I feel like that's probably very relatable for a lot of students, because I think a lot of times music students go into undergrad thinking, I know what I'm going to do, but actually, like you're saying, a lot of us go in with a very naive kind of idea of what the musical career is, and maybe having not had a lot of exposure to what it actually entails to get into music and all of that. And so I feel like that time especially in your undergrad, is so instrumental in trying out different things and exploring and searching and coming to the realization for yourself on exactly what pathway you want to go down. So I think it's really helpful that you share that you experienced that, but then you had this moment where it really helped you crystallize what exactly you were looking for, and then you were able to better pursue that because of it. Could you talk a little bit more about that period of searching at Eastman and these other maybe experiences that were filtering into your academic experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I did do a little bit of searching, and let's see, I did also try out some new skills. So I was part of the Violinist gamelan. There's so many interesting things at Eastman that you can try.
Yeah.
And I also started playing with the early music ensemble there. So I took a class with Paul Odette, who of course is just one of the most amazing lutenists in the world, and also really effective teacher. So I loved his class, and it opened my mind to the world of early music. So I started playing a little bit of Baroque violin, which I still do a little bit.
Wow.
And that was also an instrumental thing that happened. And I took a couple academic courses at U of R too, just to feel that out. But that's about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even this weekend, I've been spending some time at the U of R campus, and I always feel kind of lost there. So I'm like, it's so big.
Right.
And there's like, how do I find my way around?
It's what I expected college would be like, but it's not what we experienced.
Yeah, it's very different. But it's cool that it's available to students. Yeah. And that, if you are an Eastman student, you can go over there, and you don't even have to do a double major or something. You can just take 1 or 2 classes and just experience it.
Right. I don't know how much it is that way now. I assume it's just the same as when I was there. But you can just get on a bus and go over to the campus and take pretty much any class that you want.
Yeah, which is cool. It's just a nice opportunity, and interesting to see how the other half lives, I guess. And, this is more of a typical undergraduate student experience. It's nice to dip your toe in, I guess.
There's more options in the cafeteria.
Yeah. On a small Eastman campus, there's only so many food options.
Right.
On a larger one, there's a lot more. So
yes, indeed.
So what were your career goals while you were at Eastman? Did you have an idea? You talked about wanting to be in an orchestra. Was that your main idea of what you wanted to do when you left?
I think so. Yeah. So it was a combination of a few different things. I think watching my parents have to create their own careers.
Yeah. So were they freelance?
Yes.
Musicians? Okay.
Yeah. So watching them sort of piece it together every day I always thought, gosh, that must be really stressful. And I wanted a job that had a little bit more security and just that I could a little more regularity, I guess. And that paired with that inspiration from watching the symphony growing up and falling in love with orchestral repertoire. And then finding this amazing teacher, Juliana, who taught rep class, I started to see that as a path forward that would make a lot of sense. And then little by little started just really, really want that. Yeah. Especially as I realized how competitive it is to do.
Yeah.
It sort of lit a fire for me.
Were you thinking I'll go on to do a master's after I graduate, or were you thinking I'll start taking auditions, or what were your thoughts for graduating from Eastman?
I knew that I wanted to do a master's. I knew that I wanted to keep practicing and learning, progressing hopefully a little bit more.
How did you think about where you wanted to go? Were you again looking at what other students at Eastman were doing, or trying out different schools?
Yeah, I did look at what other people at Eastman were doing. CIM was on my radar because I just thought of that as an orchestral-minded place, knowing that the Cleveland Orchestra is there. And a lot of the teachers there play in the Cleveland Orchestra. Also, my teacher, Juliana, studied with the concertmaster of the Cleveland Orchestra. So there's just a lot of connections. It seemed like a logical place to look at. And it was nearby. It was driving distance. So, it made a lot of sense to go there.
Yeah. How did you end up going there? I guess you applied and auditioned. Did you apply anywhere else? And then what was your experience like while you were there?
Yeah, I did apply a couple other places. I think I applied to Rice and MC. I honestly can't remember all the exact places. And I also thought about New World for a little bit. And I ended up just segueing from my teacher, Juliana, to her teacher, Bill Brussel at CIM.
Yeah. So. How was the master's program at CIM different than your undergraduate experience?
It was so different.
Yeah.
It was so different. So CIM is a lot smaller than Eastman. Eastman is already really small.
I was going to say.
Yeah, CIM is a lot smaller. I think it might be like 500, something like that, where Eastman's more like 2,000.
I feel like when I was here, I believe, I could be wrong, I believe the numbers were 500 undergrads and maybe 400 postgrads.
Okay.
So maybe
I think I'm thinking of my high school. So I think I went from a 2,000 person high school to a 1,000 person undergrad school to a 500.
Wow, just having it. Other stuff in the way.
I think you're right. So it felt different because it was smaller.
Yeah.
And then one big difference that I noticed is just that there were less degrees offered there. So there's no jazz program at CIM.
Oh,
and I
interesting.
didn't realize that was such a special thing about Eastman that I would miss. But I really missed having jazz music around and also those personalities.
Yes.
You know?
They're fun people.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
and I guess the Jazz Festival is such a big thing in Rochester as well. And yeah, I remember going to jazz concerts and it's just fun.
It's so fun. Yeah, but I loved CIM. And I had a really interesting experience there. Before going, I found out that they had this cool program where a couple of their students could live at this retirement community that was nearby.
Interesting.
Yeah, the place is called Judson Manor. And ironically, there's even a couple former Cleveland Orchestra members who now live in that retirement community, and they love music. They're so just creative and such thoughtful people. It's an amazing community. So, and I'm not totally sure if they still do it, but at the time when I was a student, they always had 2 CIM students living there, and the students would live there for free in exchange for just creating programming for the residents.
Wow, so you were one of those.
So I applied for that, and I ended up doing that.
Amazing.
Which was really cool because I saw that and I just thought, oh my gosh, that's so something that I want to do.
How did you find out about that program?
I think I was just maybe searching around like the CIM website or something like that.
Yeah.
And started seeing some videos about it. And I just was really determined to do that. And it worked out for me, which was so cool. And so while I was there, I also had this unique community of older people who like really took me in and were so kind and sort of helped me slow down in my otherwise very hectic and focused musical life. And they were very supportive. So they would come to all my recitals and I would perform all of my recitals there beforehand. And even when I was preparing for orchestra auditions, I would play all of my run-throughs for them. They're so supportive.
Ready-made
so
audience.
Kind. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How was because you were saying you were responsible for programming for the community. What did that look like? And had you done anything like that before?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think about that. I mean, I had just kind of created my own recitals and maybe a couple little programs, like I guess from playing with my parents. I had put together programs before. And also I had a chamber group growing up and we put together programs. So mostly I would work with the pianist who lived there, who actually, ironically, she also went to Eastman before going to Mary Van Hooser. I don't know if you know.
Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so we lived there together and we put on recitals together. So we worked together to come up with their programming. Sometimes we would bring in other students to perform and help facilitate those concerts.
Okay. So it was mainly recitals that you were doing yourself or that you brought other CIM students, but you were still organizing all of that.
Yeah, and I also had a quartet when I was at CIM, and we would do concerts at Judson Manor also.
Yeah.
And also my parents came and visited, and we played concerts there. So.
Oh my gosh. That's really special.
Yeah.
That's really amazing that a program like that exists, and I think it's really cool that you found it and that you went for it and then got that experience, because how helpful that you didn't have to worry about housing costs, and then how incredible that you were able to plug into this other kind of community that maybe not a lot of other students would ever have the opportunity to experience, and then to exercise those skills of, organizing and programming and putting on all these kinds of different concerts.
Yeah. And it was great for me, but they said it was great for them too.
Of course.
I feel like intergenerational work and living is good for everybody.
Yeah.
So, everybody benefits from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I was living in London, I spent some time living with a family. And like you're saying, that intergenerational living, this wasn't with older people, but there was a young girl and they became sort of my second family. And I just think those kinds of experiences really help shape you as a person in other ways than maybe a more typical experience of living in the dorms. And so it's really great that you can have that kind of variety, even in, not in just your playing, but in your own just life as well.
Yeah, totally. It was very inspiring. Yeah.
That's cool. I hope that program still exists.
I know, and I hope that it catches on in other places. I think it would work really well here in Rochester.
Yeah.
There's a couple places that,
people should take note.
I know.
Start up similar things.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, because like you say, it's just beneficial on all sides. Like everyone benefits. There's no downside. So why not?
Yeah.
Amazing. So you spent 2 years at CIM?
Well, it was a 2-year semester, 2-year master's degree. In September of my second year, I took the audition for RPO and I got it. But I wanted to finish my degree, so I just commuted for that year. And thankfully, both the RPO was willing to be flexible and also CIM was willing to be flexible. So they helped me work out a way to come but not be there all the time and make up things on my own time. So I was able to finish that degree.
Okay. So you're saying it was the beginning of your second year at CIM that you took the audition for the RPO. Was this your first professional audition or had you taken others before?
I had taken some others before.
Okay.
I had auditioned for the RPO sub list beforehand.
When you were at Eastman?
When I was at Eastman. I probably did it a couple times, and ultimately I did get on the sub list, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't my first attempt.
Yeah.
And then when I lived in Cleveland, I auditioned for regional orchestras in the area. And that was a great starting point. This is sort of a separate question, but that was a great starting point for learning to play in an orchestra. I was playing the Canton Symphony when I lived in Cleveland.
And that was a regional orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah, it was maybe like an hour away from Cleveland, something like that. And then I had auditioned for the Kansas City Symphony a couple times and auditioned for the New World Symphony. So I had done a few. Oh, and also some of the summer festivals that I auditioned for had orchestral excerpts.
Yeah. Did you do summer festivals later?
I did summer festivals pretty much every year. Yeah. I felt like I just needed that extra time to
experience. Yeah. And like you say, it sounded like once you decided orchestra was kind of the direction you wanted to go, you were very much taking all these opportunities to propel you on that pathway.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to do festivals that had a good orchestra program for the most part. Yeah.
What was the audition process like for the RPO?
Okay. So for that audition in September.
Yeah, the one that you won.
Okay, all right. Oh my gosh. It was kind of hilarious, actually. So this was a 1-year assistant principal second violin audition. And I knew that I wouldn't be done with school, but I thought it would be a good one that I really cared about, so a good one to shoot for, and it was nearby. And I had the connection to Rochester, so that also fueled my desire to take that audition.
Yeah.
And I prepared really hard for it, and I played for so many friends in practice rooms and at like our regional orchestra gigs. We'd like find a storage closet and I'd play for my friends there. I just played for people all the time.
Just really quickly, I'm wondering if you could break down some more of that preparation process, and because you were also studying at CIM at the time, or was it over the summer? Or
yeah, at the time.
Okay. So how did you balance that with school? And maybe it fed into what you were already doing at CIM. And do you have any sort of tips and advice for that audition preparation time?
It is an intense process, and I think you just have to do it and learn from doing it because everybody has a different system or that works for them. My husband, for instance, he never plays for or rarely plays for people when he prepares for auditions.
Wow.
And then I have to play for tons of people to get my nerves out. So it's a little bit different for everybody, but there's so many, like you can even find step-by-step processes out there for preparing over a 2-month period and how you can do that. There's so many different methods.
What did it look like for you?
For me, it was just a little more freeform, just learning and preparing on my own and trying to get to the highest level based on work in my various rep classes and lessons, and then playing for as many people and recording myself a lot.
Yeah.
So I might approach an audition a little bit differently now than I did then. That's kind of what I did then.
Yeah.
And that particular audition was actually on my birthday. So I had like a little extra, I think, energy that day. And I didn't tell my parents about it because in the past, telling people just was too much pressure.
Yeah.
So I decided, okay, I'm just going to go do this. I remember like the day that I went to go audition, I went to go get in my car after warming up in a practice room, and I had a flat tire. I was like, are you kidding me? So right when I needed to leave, I couldn't go anywhere. So I just like ran downstairs, and it was raining, and I like flagged down whatever bus was going by and said, can you take me to this place? And
oh my God,
they took me there, and then like my tea spilled all over my audition desk there. So there's so many things, that you just... Yeah, so many things that you just can't possibly predict. But I still had like a lot of just determination and fire. And so that audition went well, and that one worked out for me. But it kind of threw me off. Like I really loved Cleveland, and I loved my retirement community. And so I was also kind of sad when it happened. It was an abrupt end to my time in that city that I really loved. So, but I couldn't turn down that professional opportunity. And here I am 10 years later in the orchestra, and it's totally my home now.
And that's really great that they were able to work with you and make it possible that you could sort of juggle these two things of finishing up your degree while you're at CAM, and then I guess commuting and going into the orchestra at the same time. Yeah, that's really nice. And I think it's nice to know that there are professional organizations out there that will, take the extra time to personally help you and listen to you and make those kinds of things possible.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about the audition day maybe? And because I feel like I have a decent idea as a wind player about how wind auditions go, but I don't know that much about string auditions. Maybe it's the same, maybe it's not, I don't know. But were there multiple rounds? Were there different things that they were asking in different rounds? What was all of that like?
Yeah, so you will get a list a month or two in advance of every excerpt that they might ask you, and a couple concertos. And then when every audition is a little bit different, but for this one, you arrive and go to a group warm-up room. And then when it's nearly your turn to play, like you may have drawn a number after being just told what hour to show up, and you draw a number within that hour. When it's your turn to go into your own private warm-up room, then they'll give you a shorter list for the preliminary round. And then you have a little bit of time to prepare that list, and then you're taken on the stage or in whatever room the audition's happening, and you can't talk. And you have to walk on a carpet, and it's blind behind a screen. And then someone's voice will ask you to get settled and start playing. And then you just kind of play through the list, or they might stop you, or they might ask you to do something differently. And then you just leave. And then when everybody in your hour is done, then everybody gathers in a waiting room, and they'll tell you who goes on to the next round. Or these days, sometimes they do that by email, which I think is really cool. I think maybe overall, the trend is going more in the direction of more blindness in auditions, so less unscreened final rounds, and even a little bit more privacy in the experience of who's passing. I think that's really cool. That only adds to the pressure.
Do you have any thoughts on why maybe it's getting more blind? Had you seen in the past that auditions were maybe unscreened for the final round, and now you feel like it's not so much anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like very few orchestras are moving in the direction of less screens. So, I mean, everybody's just trying to be more equitable. Everybody's just trying to be as fair as possible. Ideally. So
that's nice to know. It's interesting to know, and just to think about, the trends of what's happening in the audition space. It's interesting.
It's an incredible mind game preparing for an audition. You got to make sure you have a lot of support, and just go easy on yourself, and remember that it's just you're not being judged. It's just you're playing in that moment.
Yeah.
Try to separate that from yourself, because it can be easy to not pass or not win 10 auditions and just feel like such a failure. But playing an audition is really different from a lot of other kinds of performing, and it's just a different skill, the skill to be able to deliver who you are as a musician in 5 minutes behind a screen. It's really unique.
That's really helpful. And I'm wondering, because I know I've heard from chatting with other people as well about their audition experiences, do you feel like maybe it helped you that you weren't sort of desperate for this job because you had, you know, a degree to finish and you had this retirement community that you're serving in CIM, so maybe you didn't feel quite as much pressure in that audition in particular because it wasn't like, I have to win this job?
Maybe, but I think I was also starting to feel the pressure as the end of my schooling was was nearing, and I was thinking, this is the time to propel myself into the next thing, and I'm going to have to feed myself and house myself. And so I think it was maybe in some ways that there was a relief of pressure from not needing it in that moment, but there also was the pressure of the end of school coming. And I think that helped to fuel my preparation. So maybe a little bit of both.
And that makes sense. And I can imagine, especially getting towards the end of your studies, I feel like every musician, every student wrestles with that question of what's coming next and how am I going to feed myself and how am I going to pay the bills. And I think especially for musicians, you never really know exactly when that next audition will come, and let alone
especially
even winning it.
Especially for wind players.
So I think it is totally understandable that even when you are in this pretty good space where you were, obviously it's impossible not to be thinking ahead and trying to prepare for, you know, graduating and entering the career field anyways. So
yeah, and that I'm partially glad that you're doing this podcast, just because there are so many challenges at that phase of life. So end of school, beginning of career, whether there's a gap there or not, or overlaps or whatever, I feel like that's kind of a time in life that you don't really get so prepared for when you're in school. It's just hard to prepare for in general. And once you are done with school, you're just so very much all on your own for the first time. And whether you are just trying to win an audition, which is its own kind of like really difficult situation, or if you have a job, but all of a sudden you're getting no feedback and you have so little structure to your life, and you're just trying to figure out how to prepare and structure your time and learn music really quickly. And you don't have your support network necessarily of all your close friends. It can feel kind of lonely, and it can be hard to navigate. So it's just a time that I don't think people talk about very much. And maybe everybody's feeling alone, but they're all feeling alone together and they just don't know it. So let's talk about that more. Let's all talk about that more.
And I really appreciate you saying that, because that's absolutely a main motivation behind starting the podcast. I feel like, especially having finished 3 musical degrees now myself, I often get asked that question at each stage, you know, what comes next? What are you doing next? And I always feel very insecure when I don't have an answer to that. And it's a really hard question to answer, especially in our industry where there's a lot of uncertainty about what does come next, because who knows? So many things could come next. But I think in that insecurity, there's also a lot of excitement. And, you know, I guess my idea with this podcast is being able to share that there's so many different pathways that musicians can go down. And so many different ways that people could be orchestrating their careers. And so I think navigating that transition time and those transition periods are really hard. And like you say, something that maybe isn't addressed as much, because it's hard to address a really ambiguous, uncertain time. Whereas, you know, some other parts of the music field maybe have more of a set pathway that you can follow. So I think it's great to be able to discuss it more. And I really appreciate people like you being willing to come on and just share their own story, because I feel like even though everyone's story is unique and different, there's little pieces of advice and wisdom that we can all pick up and garner from everyone's different stories. And so I really appreciate you sharing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what you want can keep changing. And, I think it's kind of just up to us to always evaluate how what we're doing is making us feel. And if we're feeling drawn to something, follow that. If you feel like you can have your maximum resonance in one area more than another, then follow that. And I feel like what I'm doing more or less is somewhat mainstream, but I'm actually still always trying to figure out my path and trying to figure out what I'm meant to be doing, both like how can I give most and how can I feel the happiest and most settled.
I love that. And yeah, I mean, you say that your path is maybe a little more mainstream because I suppose in some ways it can look like that on paper, like you studied at music school, you did your undergraduate and masters in performance, and then you went on to pretty immediately and amazingly win an orchestral job and play in an orchestra, which is the dream of so many musicians. And
it was just so lucky,
But I mean, also took a lot of hard work and a lot of focus and a lot of intentional decision making on your part to propel you on that pathway, as you've been saying. But I feel like having heard a little bit more about what you're doing now, I don't think it's completely conventional. So I think it'll be exciting to get to hear more about the other different parts of what your life looks like now. Before we get quite to there, could you share a little bit about your time starting out in the orchestra? What was that period like of adjusting to playing with a professional orchestra, having come from preparing for this throughout your whole training?
Oh my gosh, yes. I wish I could say that I feel like it was more of a seamless transition or that I had more confidence, but I think those voices of insecurity that have always been with me just started being really loud again in this moment because I felt a lot of pressure. The job that I actually got was not a tenure track job. It was just a 1-year job. But it was kind of a high pressure job. It was like a leadership position with people that have been in the orchestra, many people sitting behind me that have been in the orchestra for decades. And so I just felt pretty inadequate doing that. There's just no way that I could possibly have enough experience to be always ready. And so, I tried to do my best and I just tried to not let people down, but I had a lot of imposter syndrome there. And then I knew that at the end of that year, I was going to not have a job again. So I had that fire all over again. So I managed to take a series of, I've taken so many auditions within my own orchestra. I can't even count how many. And some of them successful and many of them not successful. But I've obviously learned from all of them. So I've moved around a lot within my own orchestra.
That's
and
so interesting.
I've had a lot of 1-year things. And now I have tenure in the orchestra and I'm very grateful for that. But
it took time.
It took some time and I still will maybe take some auditions in my own orchestra. But back to your original question. Starting out was very difficult for me because of some of the reasons I mentioned before. I didn't have feedback, which I was used to having. And I was very reliant, I realize now, on guidance from my teachers. So what's the best fingering and what's the best everything and how do I do this and how do I do that? And so I was just trying to figure it out for myself without letting down people around me. And then I was trying to figure out how to structure my time, all of a sudden having more time than I was used to having. And then I had all these voices in my head and it was hard for me to transition. And it took a lot of time for me to feel more confident in what I do. And in some ways, just now I'm starting to find that a little bit more, I think just with years of doing it. And so I just did the best that I could for so long, even though I didn't always feel confident.
Do you have any insight into battling with that, especially in those especially even in that first year of, feeling all of this insecurity and hearing these voices? Because I can imagine I would feel similarly. I can imagine a lot of people would feel similarly, especially when you're joining an orchestra where there's a lot of members who've been established and playing in it for a long time, and you're the new piece, and you have to fit into that sound and into that community, and that's a lot, even just socially, not even in mind with musically, all these different things that you have to keep in mind. Do you have any thoughts on, how to better approach that or handle that? Mm-hmm. Or even maybe just in hindsight as well?
Right, in hindsight. I mean, I think it's always going to be hard, but in hindsight, I wish I hadn't felt so ashamed of that, because it was pretty natural and pretty to be expected. Yeah. And so I think that I should have felt okay, like maybe talking to people about it, or just seeking more advice, or even seeking more training. So that's something that I feel like there's a little bit of a stigma against in our field. Yeah. It's like being trained even once you're like in the professional field. Yeah. So I did have occasional lessons with my former teacher and with other teachers, but I probably could have done more of that. And there's nothing wrong with always having a curious mind. There's no point of arrival. I don't feel like I've arrived. Like, I have a job, but I don't feel like I'm at a point of arrival. I feel like I'm just always moving forward. And so one of my own goals is just to keep learning more and keep a curious mind and asking questions. And just, I feel like people can only see that as, if they see that as a weakness, then that's their problem. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah, I think that's helpful. And I think even just hearing what you're saying and realizing that and knowing that, even if it feels like this, there doesn't have to be the stigma, I guess, about what you're saying, maybe seeking out more lessons or talking to people in the orchestra about it, and maybe people will be more approachable and open about it than I think they would be. So I think even just having that knowledge and going in armed with that knowledge of, even when I'm feeling these feelings and when, the situation and the environment can feel a certain way, I can still try to act, differently, going against those thoughts and feelings. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just remember, like, everybody's been there. Yeah. The person next to you might have been here for 30 years, but at one point it was their first day too. Yeah. They probably felt a little bit nervous. Absolutely. Yeah. I also think that's so interesting how you're explaining that, this first job was a 1-year job, which is nerve-wracking. I haven't had a job in an orchestra, but I know when I went over to London, I had a 1-year scholarship, and I lived in London for 7 years, and I'm so grateful for that time. But every year I had to fight for funding, because I never knew. I always had funding for 1 year. I never knew what would happen the next year. So I can understand some of that insecurity and that uncertainty of, I have no idea where I'll be next year, and, fighting and being scrappy and all these kinds of things of, trying to get just the next step forward. So can you share some of that time and what it looked like for you, and taking all of these different auditions, even within one orchestra, what that looks like? Yeah. So, just to be totally transparent, that was also really challenging for me. So I was still trying to get used to managing my time and everything, having a job, and then trying to prepare for auditions while also having the job. Yeah. It was very taxing, and it was really difficult for me to just find the time and find, like, the strength in my body to do that much playing in a day. Yeah. Because it's just so strenuous to prepare for an audition. So I have such a better mindset about it now, I think. And my auditions, which I continue to take, I think that I have a more balanced approach now. So instead of thinking of my job and my audition preparation as separate things, I try to work on being more of a whole musician. And because I have 2 little kids now who demand a lot of my time, I have to use every moment that I'm holding my instrument as efficiently as possible. So it doesn't matter if I'm playing just a pops program that is on paper easy. That time on my instrument is so valuable. And I know that now because I have these kids that limit my time a lot. So whatever I'm doing, I just try to really think about my technique and listen to my intonation and try to make my vibrato continuous and all these things that I used to think I had to do separately in the practice room. Just like learning how to be more of a whole musician and integrate all of your skills into everything that you do. So it's amazing that it's taken me so long to start figuring that out, but it's something that I try to do more. At the time, I wish I would have just realized that whenever I'm playing my instrument, I could be working on improving and utilizing that time. Utilizing the time, right. And so, and that time that you're spending on your technique can directly improve your audition excerpts. It's not like that's a waste of time. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that's really helpful, because I think
I think, like you say, a lot of times I feel personally as a musician that things are in boxes. And like you're saying, maybe you might not consider time on the stage or time in rehearsal as the same as practice time. But by being really intentional with, like you're saying, all of the time that you just have on the instrument. And I think even just being very mindful of taking the most advantage of that time. Because I think maybe if you're in rehearsal, it might take more effort to be having that mindset of, really thinking about your technique. Because maybe it's easier to do that in a practice room setting because that's where you're used to. But actually you can translate it into different settings and, then be more efficient and take advantage of those times if you're not able to spend as much time in a practice room.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that's helpful to know that it's just that mind shift of being able to look at different situations maybe with a different frame of mind. Does that make sense? Yeah. How was taking auditions for different positions within the RPO? How did that work? What did that look like? So did you, in the midst of your first year in the RPO, were you then hearing about a possibility of another audition that you then took? What did that look like?
Yeah. So auditions would just come up and I'd hear about it and start preparing those series of like core positions and B contract positions and 1-year positions and all of these different things. So I took every different kind of audition.
Yeah.
And were you asking about my particular path through those? Yeah. I can't even remember because I feel like almost every year it's been like a different audition. At some point I took another 1-year position and got a 1-year position in the first violins. And then the position that I have now is actually called B contract, but not every orchestra has that. So it's a tenure track position, but it's not the core. So I do play actually in almost everything, but it's really hard to explain. The core, sometimes I don't play things.
It's probably, like you say, it's probably every orchestra has their own system.
Has a different system. Some orchestras rotate between the sections. So
you're just navigating your way through the RPO's own ecosystem.
Yes, exactly.
How about some different parts of what your career looks like now? So are you involved in other things? I have seen on Facebook, which is really fun and cool, that you've gotten into flower arranging, which looks beautiful. I love seeing your photos and things pop up on my feed because they're always just gorgeous. And then, as you said, you also have 2 beautiful kids and you're married. So there's a lot of different pieces, even just from that. Maybe if you could share if there are any others and how these things all work together in your life.
Yeah, I guess I'm the kind of person that likes to be doing a lot of different things. I have a lot of different interests. So I'm always trying to balance my time a little bit better. But a really big part is also my quartet that I play with. I'm in a quartet with 3 other RPO musicians, although one of them just moved to Buffalo with somebody, but we're still playing together. So our group is called the Salaff Quartet, and we named ourselves after our teacher, Peter Salaff from CIM, because all of us happened to go to CIM before.
And now you're all in the RPO.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That group's been together for like 9 or 10 years, and it is such a joyful part of my life. They're very good friends of mine, and we, I think, have equal levels of commitment to the group, how much we can commit. And we play a few concerts every year, and we do things here and there, and it's just the right amount for us, and we're very community oriented. And I just, having that group has been so integral to my happiness and growth as a musician. And I feel very lucky that I found them, because it's not a given.
And it's nice because it sounds like that's sort of pulling on even what you were doing from the very beginning of, playing with your parents around the community, and then continuing that into your studies and this retirement community when you were, doing chamber stuff with them. And then you're able to just continue that now with this group. And I feel like it's this thread that's been there from the beginning for you.
So luckily, there was just a time at Eastman when I didn't have a steady chamber group that I played with, and I really missed it. I think is so important, and because it's a specific kind of challenge, and you can play this amazing music that's out there, and you can go to so many different places and spaces because you're smaller and you can relate to people more personally.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, incredibly rewarding and like much needed as an orchestral player, when sometimes you can just feel like one of a mass, no matter how hard you're working and how well you're playing on that day. You may not feel the rewards of the more personal connections.
Yeah.
So being able to be in smaller settings. We've played in so many different and interesting types of settings and connected with so many different and interesting people.
Yeah. Could you share what some of those interesting settings and people that you connected with are?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a retirement community that's been very welcoming to us here. And we come back every year and have started to bond with those people. And that's a very special place. We've been to so many different schools in the area. Lots of public school programs have brought us in. There's some amazing centers for people of all ages with special abilities, and we've worked with those in those communities. And where else? Oh, and then just like, random public places in town. And during COVID, we would play a lot of outdoor concerts. And, all kinds of things.
Very versatile. Yeah. How does it work financially with that? Do you have to apply for funding grants, or are you sort of looking individually at each place you perform on getting funding from them? How does that work? Yeah, well, we could, if we did that, if we kind of created more of a business out of our quartet, I think we would do that. We would be searching for grants and that kind of thing. We're a little bit more passive in that aspect. So we were invited to be like an ambassador quartet for the Society of Chamber Music in Rochester. So they create a lot, performances for us. Amazing. And then other than that, we're just invited to do things. Yeah. And the fact that we're connected with RPO helps a lot too, actually, because they find some performance opportunities for us. And then occasionally individual people will reach out to us. But I also play in more of a gig quartet with another wonderful friend from Eastman. And she's very active. So she's made it a big part of her career to be a quartet manager. And she's created her own business, and she's incredibly organized, and she has a beautiful contract written up, and she does a great job communicating with the people that we're performing for. Yeah. And so she's been very proactive about creating this as a business. Yeah. And she puts out an amazing product. She and her husband also do a lot of their own arranging of the music that we play. So she's taken, again, a very unique route after her musical career to create something and just make it work and do a really good job based on things that her own skills. So she's another person that I admire for the work that she's done since school. And that's cool that you get to see sort of both sides in these two different ensembles that you're playing. Yeah. Could you talk some about flower arranging and how you got into that, how that happened? Right, that's been a really fun thing over the past few years. I just kind of fell into that. It became like a hobby and then sort of an obsession. I just had to do something with it. I don't know if you feel that way about Lord of the Rings and food blogging. And I can't not do this. Absolutely. It's too fun. So we moved into our own house, and we're lucky enough here in Rochester to be able to have a yard. We can have a growing space here, a garden. And so when we moved into our house, I just got so excited when I realized I could grow flowers and give them to people. Something that I just grew in the ground at my house and bring it to someone, and it'd be really special. And then I started just learning more and doing more and experimenting more, and then eventually kind of turned our yard into frankly a little farm. Amazing. A little out of control. And then during COVID, I thought, okay, I'm not doing anything else. Let's do something with the flowers. So I created a little flowers and fundraising project in my gobs of spare time. And that was really cool. It's kind of a way to connect people who weren't seeing each other in person. Again, they could donate to a cause. Hopefully, most of them were local causes that would just kind of promote equity in Rochester. And so kind of encourage people to be giving into our community and making it better. And then if they do that, then they can send flowers to a friend, which at the time really nobody was seeing each other. So it kind of made sense in my mind. There was a lot of also racial reckoning during that time when we were all at home. So just let's
put our resources into these areas that really need help in our city. Housing equality and food equality and racial equality and all of these things. And then connect with each other through flowers. So that was fun. And then it's kind of evolved from there. So now I have like a teeny tiny little side business of like doing bouquet bars.
Amazing.
So yeah, I've just done a couple at our local tea shop, and then I have some more plans with that. So it's really just something that I love doing, and I loved it enough to want to try to make a little side hustle out of it.
Yeah.
So
that's so cool. And I think that's just beautiful that you started this, especially during such a challenging time for our world and for society, and that you found this beautiful little piece that you could add to just help make it a little bit better. And I think that's really sweet. I mean, I've been here during Meliora weekend, and the anthem, the motto for the University of Rochester and Eastman is Meliora Ever Better. And I just think that's something that like a lot of Eastman students are going out and doing in their communities. And so to hear, your little piece, it doesn't have to be something massive. Like even small gestures can mean so much, especially during times like what was happening in the middle of COVID and all of that. So I think that's really special that you were able to take this interest and then put it into your community.
Sure. But it's not all selfless. Like, I also enjoy doing it. And also like, this time in life, as we were talking about, it can be unpredictable and difficult after you graduate from school. But you're also kind of finding your identity outside of music in some ways, or at least I hope that like one would feel the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
Because we can, I think, especially if you're in the music field, you've probably been playing your instrument for most of your life, and it's very closely linked with your own identity.
Yeah.
So finding who you are as a person outside of your instrument is currently an important process to me. It's something that's important to me, because if you just only link yourself to your profession or your instrument, then it can be too easy to just be too hard on yourself when something doesn't go as planned, or you don't win the audition, or the performance doesn't go as well as you wanted it to.
Yeah.
You can just take that very personally and get so down on yourself. So it helps me a little bit to think and find more who I am outside of violin, just as a whole person.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. And I have found this as a musician and as well as being in content creation, because I think, especially in social media, you're so encouraged to niche down and find, a very specific little community, which is very impactful and really effective a lot of times. But I've always struggled with that fact that I have so many interests and so many
Me too.
things that I want to share and do, and so I've never been good at niching down. And it's maybe not the best for growth, but I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm like, I'm just going to create things that, like you're saying, that I want to create and explore more of who I am as a whole person. And if that lands, then great. And if it doesn't, then that's fine, because I enjoy making it and I find joy in the process. And I feel like social media and that landscape is sort of exploring that idea that people are more than just, one niche in social media or in music. People are more than just their instrument, and we can be developing ourselves as more whole people. And I think that's really important. Like you say, it's beneficial to the community. It's beneficial to you as well. It's sort of like the retirement community. It's like everyone wins. It's like, why not?
I mean, you're totally right. What else can we do except just what feels right in the moment, because we can't see the future. So 10 years from now, you'll be looking back at this time and probably saying, thank goodness I tried that thing, because look what it's turned into. Look how much joy it brought me, how I even just made this connection with this one person that's now a valuable part of my life.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you just never know what can happen with what you put out into the world. So that's really cool that you just took this interest and you made it into this little side hustle business. Very exciting. Would you say there's anything from your time training at music school, maybe at Eastman and or CIM, that has helped you for this side of business? Because it's seemingly very separate from a music degree and background, but are there things that you have felt, actually, I can see how my background in music is contributing to this part of what I'm doing in this side of the
First thing that comes to mind is just like the attention to detail.
Yeah.
That's such a huge thing as a musician. So like, trying to create something beautiful. I guess that's what you're doing in both cases. So I guess it makes sense as someone who has high attention to detail, but also enjoy doing other things that
require
you might need to be very precise or thoughtfully put together. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, let's see. I think I've maybe learned a lot of I shouldn't say this right now. I'm not a professional public speaker. You have to do a lot of public speaking.
You have to put yourself out there.
When you're playing concerts, whether you're comfortable doing it or not. And then when you're out in the town, putting yourself out there in a new and uncomfortable way. You're also talking to people, just trying to communicate. So were there other parts of putting together this little side business that you could maybe draw out? So, I don't know, branding or social media, or what do you think? There's like so many areas that I can work on. I don't even have a website yet.
So how do you find people? How do you find people to connect with for your flower business?
I'm just rolling with it. It's definitely a baby right now. So just kind of using social media to get the word out there. And some things have started coming back. So I guess maybe once you reach a certain point of reaching enough people, creating a tiny little buzz, then things start coming back to you too. So it's probably the same, if you form a band or a chamber ensemble or something, it's probably the same kind of thing. Once you get out and do a few performances and people really love it, they'll start talking to each other and things will start circling back around. It certainly just takes time to build that buzz. But obviously, like, if you're really on top of it, just creating a website and putting yourself out there, you can do it so quickly. With between advertising and branding and website and being really active on social media.
And I think
I can do more of that.
No, but I think what you're already doing, I've already been seeing, your flowers come up on my feed, and you don't have a website, but it's still the word is getting put out there. And I think also just utilizing, because I've seen mutual friends who have then mentioned your flowers in my feed, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. This person has, benefited from that. And because obviously you have a lot of pieces to your career and a lot of things that you're doing. You have a whole family and 2 kids, so you can only do so much. But even just the little things that you do, like you were sort of saying with practicing, being effective with those little pieces can still go a long way.
I like what you're saying. I had not thought about that tying in. I thought about it feeding me mentally and emotionally, but I guess professionally also. But social media can go a really long way. And honestly, I don't have that much time to do much more with it than I'm already doing. So I think if I were determined to do more with my flower business, I could make that happen through those routes of advertising and website and everything. But right now, it just is sort of making me happy. And doing it occasionally is enough. So I'm just letting it breathe and as is.
And that's, it doesn't have to be any more than that ever, because you have all these other parts of your career that you're also juggling, and it's fun to have a side hobby that maybe can be a little bit of a side hustle anyways. And a lot of people have hobbies that aren't side hustles at all. They're just hobbies, and that's great too. So it doesn't have to be a fully fledged business or become something. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. Yours, you've sort of been saying throughout the whole interview, a lot of that just curiosity and exploring and trying other things and exploring, who you are and other interests and all of that. It's just important to do as a human being. So
absolutely.
Cool. How does your family fit into all of it, and how have you sort of been balancing, with getting married and then having 2 kids? How does that work with being in an orchestra and then having a little side hustle? How does all of that balance together?
Right. Yeah, it's been so challenging to balance. The only reason I'm doing these things is just because I'm craving what it does to feed me. But I think that obviously early years with kids, are so challenging because you just have to let go of a lot of your own, like what you thought were your needs.
Yeah.
And then do a lot of reprioritizing. And my kids really need me a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm having to learn to just be a lot more efficient in everything that I do and fit my practicing into smaller amounts of time and try to stretch them every day to be more tolerant of my needs when I'm obviously really in touch with their needs all the time. So there's a lot of practicing when people are like grabbing at my clothes and like screaming a little bit, and I try to just make them wait a couple more seconds so they can get a little more used to that. But man, it is really tough.
Yeah. How was that time period, especially when you first had kids, and balancing that with an orchestra job? Because I think, especially as women in the music field, and being a mother and balancing that with the career is always a challenge. And so I feel like the more that it can be, the more people can share how they sort of navigated it, I feel like it's really helpful. So if you'd be willing to share sort of what that time period looked like for you.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that was interesting to me is that after having kids, I kind of needed my job a little bit more in some ways to be adult time and time away from my kids. Yeah. Because even though I loved them, it was a lot of concentrated together time at the beginning. And so my career started to feel like it balanced that out a little bit. So instead of my rehearsal or concert being the most stressful part of my day, it became like actually the least stressful time of my day. Felt like
that's funny. That perspective shift, once I'm sure once you have kids, everything changes.
Yes, so many perspective shifts, and they've helped me so much to get out of my head and to quiet those voices. Because when you're a mom, you just like you're doing so much. I know that I'm doing a lot. I'm proud of how much I'm doing, and I'm proud of keeping my kids alive.
Yes, and as you should be.
Yeah, and so it's given me a lot of confidence, honestly, and it's also put a lot of things in perspective. You know, when you're caring for a life and you're seeing all the challenges of like a new person in the world, then, you know, like you still want to play your best, but missing a note, I don't get so down on myself. Yeah. You know, I don't like take it so personally as, oh, that happened. What can I do better? And it's less personal and it's less serious. Yeah. I think I'm able to take those things more lightly now. Yeah. So I have my kids to thank for that, along with a lot of other things. But yeah, like navigating those early months and still navigating that time as a new parent is pretty challenging in some ways. And I definitely felt this need to show up at work and come back as soon as possible. I don't know why I really felt that. Probably a lot of different reasons. But I felt like it was important for me to come back and show up and show that I was still as dedicated, even now that I'm a mom and whatnot. And I certainly have just really stretched myself too thin at times. And then I've figured out when I'm doing that, sometimes too late. Yeah. You know, like one time I came to play a concert after being up all night long with one of my kids and just 5 other stressful things happening, and my husband was out of town and I had no support, and I didn't play very well at that concert. And then afterwards I figured out I should have just called in. Like, it's okay to do that. Yeah. And now sometimes I'll take a week off work now and then just to give myself space, because I realized that it's a lot. That just being a parent and having this job is a lot. And it's okay to be realistic about what you can do sometimes. So thankfully I feel the freedom to do that without too much judgment. And I think I feel personally supported enough in my workplace that I'm able to do that. But I did struggle with that for many years. Yeah. Feeling like I needed to just show up and be exactly the same as before the kids, just to show how strong I am and how I'm no less strong than like the men in the orchestra, like people that don't have kids. Yeah. So there's been a lot to navigate there for sure. But, and also just a few things aren't very well set up, you know, like it was really a struggle for me to just navigate like breastfeeding in the early months, and also childcare kind of thing. Like all of a sudden we feel a little on our own trying to just figure out the very basics of getting by and making sure our kids are accounted for and everything. So
how did you manage that, especially in the very early days?
We just did it one day at a time.
Yeah.
we just figured it out one day at a time. And we got support where we needed it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, and also just seeing other people in the orchestra who had done it gave me strength and reassurance.
Yeah, that it was possible.
So, there's plenty of other mothers in the orchestra, and so I talked to them a lot and saw how they did it, and was inspired by them. Saw that some of them won auditions even after they had kids, and I thought, okay, it's possible. You can still create that time, and all of them said the same thing as I did, that in some ways you're much more efficient, you're much more focused, and you feel less pressure after you have kids. So.
It makes sense, and I think I was just about to say what you were just saying, that is why I appreciate you so much being willing to share that, because I think just for people to know that it's possible, and just to see that someone else has done it, and so I can try to navigate that too. And it's not, obviously, everyone has their own family situation, everyone has their own personal situation, and it'll look different for everybody, but if it's something that you want to have, playing in an orchestra and having kids and having a family, it is possible, and there's ways that it can work, and it'll look different for everybody. But you're saying that you were inspired by other people that you're talking to in the orchestra, hopefully people can hear what you're saying and be inspired by that. And just encouraged to know that, okay, I can see an example of how that happened. So that gives me confidence and assurance that it could be part of my future career as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I love to end every interview with a rapid fire question and answer section. I just think it's a fun way to sort of get some quick resources out there of things that you're benefiting from, things that you're currently enjoying. So we can just dive into it.
Okay. I'll do my best.
Cool. So who would you say your favorite composer is right now? It's a hard question.
So if I had to choose right now, it'd probably be Brahms, because I am preparing Brahms' Second Symphony for rehearsal tomorrow, and it's just so beautiful. Yeah. And if you asked me last week, it would be
we were playing at the time. How about your favorite piece of classical music?
Okay, again,
just to make it even more difficult.
But let's see. If I had to choose, I might have to say a group of pieces, the Opus 59 Razumovsky quartets by Beethoven.
Oh, I don't know if I've heard them.
Yeah, that's something that I've come back to throughout my life and just never stopped.
Okay. I will give those a listen. What's your favorite movie soundtrack?
Movie soundtrack. Oh, interesting. Oh, gosh. There's so many that come to mind.
Yeah. These are hard questions because it's kind of like, obviously you have kids, but it's kind of like asking your favorite child for a musician, because you work on these kinds of things so much. Or I don't know, for me, film scores are what I listen to all the time. So it's there's so many good ones.
Right, exactly. And you listen to them for different reasons.
Yeah,
but,
there's different times and places and times of your life for different things, but just for you right now.
Yeah, well, I might answer differently on a different day, but the first movie that came to my mind was Amelie. So it must have something to do with how I'm feeling today and whatnot.
I don't think I know that movie.
Oh, really?
Amelie. Is it a foreign movie? Okay.
You should definitely watch it tonight.
Where's it from?
It's French.
Okay. What could you give maybe a quick synopsis?
The main character is a little bit of an outcast, kind of adult female, a little bit of an outcast in society, and she likes doing behind the scene things to affect other people. She decides that that's going to be her life work. So she finds a little hidden treasure box from someone who used to live in her apartment, and she makes it her life goal to find that person and return it to him, but without him seeing her or knowing it was her. And it has a very charming soundtrack.
Wow, that was a great movie synopsis. That could be on the website. Perfect.
I've seen it a few times.
Yeah.
So
I'm a very big movie person, so I will add that to my.
It's no Lord of the Rings. It might be polar opposite.
Okay, I feel A good movie is a good movie. So
Yeah.
there can be appreciation in all genres.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very cool. Speaking of genres, what genre of music do you feel you listen to most of the time?
Let's see. So I think to unwind or relax, I sometimes go back to my roots and listen to more like folky music.
Yeah,
So
that's cool.
I love like Nickel Creek and Goat Romeo.
I love them.
Yeah.
Very nice.
There's also an album that I really love that kind of crosses the genres by the Danish Quartet.
Okay.
It's called Last Leaf.
Okay.
And they have like written and arranged a bunch of like either traditional Danish folk music or pieces that they've written for the quartet. And I love stuff like that crosses between like the type of music that I heard a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
And then, because we also played a lot of international folk music when I was young, and then what I do now.
Yeah.
So I really love that.
I feel like those genres those pieces of music that sort of straddle genres, I think are really cool when there can be like multiple influences. And like you're saying, like, you know, exploring different parts of who you are as a person and then finding those things that kind of speak to different parts.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
So that's fun. What are you currently reading?
Let's see. I've got a couple things on my nightstand, but I haven't started yet. The Tao of the Side Hustle is something that my husband gave me for my birthday a couple days ago.
That sounds useful.
Yeah. And then a book that is also on my nightstand that I always come back to is This is Vegan Propaganda by Ed Winters. I don't know if you've read that book.
I haven't read that book.
Yeah, we entered our journey into veganism a couple of years ago, and I've done much more reading in that field than I have like in the music field.
Okay. so did you make the...
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Molly, when she walked into the room to do the interview, she handed me a little vegan muffin. What kind of muffin is it?
It's like a morning glory muffin.
Morning
Carrot,
glory.
Raisins, spices.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Wow.
My kids like muffins.
Okay.
But one of my main ways of getting them to eat vegetables is
Yes.
muffin form and smoothie form.
Those are the best ways to hide vegetables.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When I have a smoothie, I'm like, it's just a salad. Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited to enjoy that after we finish. What's the last thing you listened to?
Like 3 different recordings of Brahms too.
Yeah,
Makes
makes
me
sense.
ready for this week. Yeah.
How about a musician you really admire?
Whenever people ask me this question, I think of like people I know, my peers. So like if I had to choose like a world famous musician, probably I would say Yo-Yo Ma. I think, yeah, he's just such an exemplary person in addition to incredible musician. He makes so many people feel included and welcomed in our field. But like day to day, I'm just very inspired by my peers who are doing interesting things. I'm currently very inspired by my friend Willa, who just got a job in Philadelphia Orchestra and left us. So I'm very sad that she's leaving, but so happy for her. And I'm also inspired because she has maintained her folk music roots and still plays beautiful fiddle music in addition to being such an accomplished violinist. So I really admire her for that.
Wow, you can play multiple genres at high levels.
Yes, I know. I guess Yo-Yo Ma does that too. So I must really admire that in people.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Willa. That's amazing to get into the Philly Orchestra.
Yeah.
Fun times ahead. Okay, and then the last question is, if there's just one resource, so a book, a movie, a podcast, an article, anything that you feel someone should go check out right now and would really benefit from, what would you say that could be?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I feel like for me, most of the resources that I use are just like people. I'm just like talking to people and from former teachers and talking to people who are like going through the same thing that I am and whatnot. But if you are like a budding musician and finding your inspiration, I know for me, like it was the Art of Etc. series that was one of the most inspiring things for me. So the Art of the Violin really got me inspired. It's a DVD documentary series. So there's also like the Art of Conducting and the Art of whatnot.
Many different things.
Yeah. So, if you're just like sort of beginning to feel serious in a field, that can be a fun way to just get a sense of the history behind your instrument or what you're doing, and see some inspiring people who perform at a high level.
Amazing. That's great. I will make sure to link to all of those things below. If there was one last piece of advice that you would give to, either a budding musician like you're saying, or someone who is in those career transition points, or just a musician in general, what would that last piece of advice that you would want to leave with the listeners? And then if you could just end with where people might be able to find you, connect with you, if they live in the area and want to find beautiful flower arranging, or, string quartet music, or just connect with you and learn more about what you're doing. How could they do that?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think that maybe it's just because I'm thinking about this a lot right now. But I guess if I had one piece of advice just for like mental health, it's just kind of to hold your identity lightly, with your instrument. And like I was saying, just personally, I've benefited a lot from separating my self-worth from my instrument, or from how I perform in a given moment. That has really is beginning to help me on a path of, I think, better mental wellness in my career and just in myself.
Yeah.
So, and maybe it's just because it's on my mind, but I think it would be to find who you are in some ways separate from your instrument, and find what you love about yourself in other places. And hold your identity a little bit more lightly. And then if people want to connect with me, I hope that you will not hesitate to reach out. You can find me on through my Salaff Quartet website, perhaps. Also through the RPO website. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram, so feel free to write me a message anytime.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much, Molly. Like I said at the very beginning, like, you were part of setting the stage and being such a welcoming presence in the Eastman community, and I feel like people are so instrumental in doing that. So I'm so grateful for you being willing to come and share your story and open up about your pathway through navigating this crazy field of ours. And I really feel like you've shared so much helpful tips and just wisdom. So I'm sure people will be able to really benefit from what you've shared. And I'm excited to see what comes up for you, especially as you're, taking more auditions and, you're doing really fun, cool things. So I'm excited to see what comes.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Orchestrating Your Career podcast, and a big thank you to Molly for sharing her story along with so much valuable advice. If you enjoyed this episode, it would be a huge help if you gave it a like, and let me know what part of Molly's story resonated with you the most. The resources mentioned in this episode and where you can connect with Molly are all linked below. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms, as well as get more frequent updates on Instagram. To watch videos of all the episodes and get extra behind-the-scenes content, check out the YouTube channel Orchestrating Your Career. Subscribe so you don't miss anything. Share this episode with a musician or anyone else you think might be interested, and look out for new episodes on the 1st and 15th of every month. Next episode's conversation will be with Annie Ray, orchestra director of Annandale High School in Northern Virginia, who just recently won the 2024 Music Educator Grammy Award. She got to attend the award show in Los Angeles, where she got a special shout out from Trevor Noah and had the opportunity to meet Taylor Swift, Meryl Streep, Oprah, and others. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss it. Until next time, here's the performance of Claire de Lune from Molly and the Salaff Quartet. Take it away.